Hey everyone, Stakey here. I'm so happy to bring you guys this Friday video, even though I said I wasn't going to upload this week. But I actually ended up getting a lot more time than I had originally anticipated for this new job. So I'm really happy to record this. Um, Anywho, if you guys didn't see, I posted an update video on Tuesday last week. And in that video, I was opening up suggestions for fan fictions that I could do readings of in following weeks where I would not be unable to upload Be Still Just for Me. So the criteria for those suggestions would be that they had to be a one shot, that the max words had to be 4 to 5K, and that they had to be safe for work. Now, I will only be accepting one submission per person. I had thought I would be getting a lot more suggestions, but at the moment I have none. So if you guys have a fanfiction that you would like me to read, please go over to that update video that I posted and put your suggestion there. I will not be accepting the suggestion if it's on this video or any other video besides that one. So do post your suggestions on that video specifically, because I do want to keep them organized and in one place. Apart from that, and do remember that those suggestions will only be for the weeks that I will not be able to upload Be Still Just for Me. So they're just a lot smaller in content and just easier to get out. And do keep in mind that if the author, because I will be going through any suggestions that I get and reading them for myself, but ultimately it is up to the author if they give me permission to read aloud. If I don't get permission, then obviously I'm not going to make a video of it. But yeah, so leave your suggestions on that video. I'll probably link it in the description. And yeah, also thank you so much for 500 subs. Yay! I was gonna post it on Twitter, but I completely forgot about it. But thank you all so much for 500 subscribers. I am so happy to have you here. Any of you who are new, some of you I know have stumbled upon these videos, but you have decided to stay, and I'm super happy about that. Welcome to all of you. I'm super happy that you're here. And hopefully this community continues to grow. And if it doesn't, if it stays this small, then I am just as grateful for all of you who have decided to stay and be here with me along on this journey. This is a really great chapter, guys. It's kicking off from here. I'm so excited. I was literally smiling by the end of recording this because I really love this chapter. I'm so happy with it. It's so good. I wish I could edit sound effects in. I wish I had more time for that, but this was a really, really long reading. It was already an hour and 10 minutes just with the reading alone. Like, it's really long. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you all so much for the support. It means the world to me. And yeah, I will still be doing, I hope at least, I will be doing a video next Friday as well. So we're continuing as scheduled, just that I was actually able to record this week. So yeah, next week there will be another Be Still Just for Me. Do remember to leave your suggestions on my update video, which will be in the link down below. And links to the author's original story will also be down below. Do not forget to go over to WitchofWriting's platforms and tell her that you are loving this story, because it is super good and it's getting super good at this moment. I'm so excited for you guys. Anywho, enjoy chapter 11. No dreams came to you that night. No nightmares either. Just dark emptiness built up from the stress of a mind muddled with disquiet. The light from outside streamed in through your curtains, but you buried your head in the sheets to avoid facing the day. But you sniffed the air and smelled something mixed in with fabric softener. What was it? A knock at your door made you tense.
Oi, get up. Food done.
Through the wood, Bakugou's voice echoed in your room with his broken translation in your own language. That dictionary was paying off, but you brushed the thought aside with the realization that Bakugou was still here, that you still had time together. You groaned and sat up to rub the sleep from your eyes before grabbing your phone to check the time. Holy shit. The screen read 10:34 a.m., later than you normally slept in, even on the weekends. Exhaustion must have hit you harder than you thought, but at least you felt rested after a proper night's sleep. Glancing at the stuffed animal that you latched onto during the night, you smiled. Maybe you helped me sleep. Stretching and yawning, you hopped off the bed and smelled whatever Bakugou was cooking. You really made breakfast, huh? I hope today isn't weird like last night. You muttered to yourself. Today, you had to make a decision on what to do before the end of the day. After panicking from the fear of Bakugou's disappearance, it hit you harder than ever that you'd regret it if he didn't know, even if he rejected you in the end. You just had to build up the courage and find the right time to spit it out. You checked yourself in the mirror first to make sure your bedhead wasn't a bird's nest before grabbing your phone and opening your bedroom door. Bakugou stood at the stove and was already plating his food when you shuffled behind him into the bathroom to freshen up and wash your hands. After taking care of your needs, you came back out to see him sitting at the table with a second plate ready and waiting for you. He glanced up as you walked closer to see him looking far less stressed than last night. Maybe things could start out better than they ended. "Good morning," you said while setting your phone down on the table and sniffing the air. Your mouth watered at the smell. Thanks for making breakfast. It smells great." He followed you with those pretty red eyes of his and smirked. If things were still uneasy between the two of you, he didn't show it.
"Of course it is. I made it."
If his ego was back, then you assumed things really were fine. Yeah, I know," you replied before taking a bite. You expected to taste peppers and spice from how vehemently he defended spicy food the previous evening, but, while it contained a bit of a kick, there was no sucker punch of fire. It made you suspicious. "Did you go back on our deal? You cook, but can make it as spicy as you want?" He rolled his eyes, a bit of mischief shining in them.
"Just you wait. This is only breakfast. Besides, who says it's not as spicy as I want at this moment?"
Logic mixed with a bit of smartassery. Classic Bakugou. The thought of him surprising you at a future meal, though, sent a shiver down your spine at his subtle threat. He must have noticed your realization, because the corner of his mouth twitched into an almost smile. Enjoying the edible food while it lasted seemed like a good idea. When the two of you finished eating, you cleaned up while dismissing his protests. If he cooked, and you cleaned, that was fair, right? Bakugou leaned against the counter as you dried off the damp plates and cooking utensils he used, your phone sitting beside the sink. "The only thing I have planned today is grocery shopping. Is there anything you need or want to do?" Since he spent most of his time alone with no transportation and no money, you wanted to extend the opportunity to break the monotony. Instead, he just shrugged his shoulders as you watched his bottom lip jut out, mulling over the question.
"No, I don't care. You said you wanted to relax, right?"
Pausing, you looked down at your own reflection in the clean, shiny plate. What he said was true. You wanted to relax after the busy week at work, coupled with the adventure of the previous weekend, but you knew he was bored despite his words. Well, you're not wrong. I just figured you'd want to do something since sitting around all week was boring." He shrugged again, but you could tell your words rang true. Then, an idea struck you when you remembered a small detail from the manga. Bakugou was an incredibly active person, both physically and mentally. His hero work surely tested the limits of his strengths and reflexes. You couldn't duplicate any of that here, but maybe something else could suffice. Phrasing it right was key. You're crazy active, right? I imagine your line of work means running and exercising and being outdoors a lot, right?" Bakugou turned to you with a curious look.
Yes. Why?
You really hoped he bought into this idea. Well, I just remembered that there's a place somewhere around here that's like one of those indoor rock climbing places. Would you be interested in something like that? We could go after we get groceries, if you want, I mean. Without Bakugou here, you would probably never do this yourself, but maybe it would be fun if you didn't totally make a fool out of yourself. Judging from the look on his face, Bakugou didn't expect that idea. He hummed to himself before a small smirk appeared on his handsome face.
Doesn't sound terrible. Yeah, sure. Think you can keep up with me?
He really couldn't help acting smug as hell, knowing full well he could climb circles around you and most of the other people there, but at least he took the bait. You giggled and shook your head. Yeah, right. It'll be great if I can at least make it to the top. Maybe you can race the other people there. I've only done this a few times before, but I had fun at least. Extreme exercise wasn't a part of your daily routine. Jogging, swimming, and your workout DVDs got the job done for the most part. All very mild things compared to what Bakugou was probably accustomed to.
Well, you're gonna make it to the top today.
Bakugou told you with a confident smile. It sounded both like a challenge and a promise, and you couldn't help but feel excited as your nerves took a back seat. You were glad that the awkwardness of the previous night had faded and could joke around with him again. Looks like we have a plan, you exclaimed with a small clap. I'm gonna take a shower. Bakugou nodded, and you took your phone into your room, letting the door close most of the way behind you. Sifting through your drawers for something to wear, another idea came to you, though this one was a bit more devious. Maybe you'd put a bit more effort into your outfit today. Nothing flashy, but something that made you feel good and look cute at the same time. It was a gamble, but maybe you could get Bakugou to slip up and give you some kind of hint about whether or not he felt the same. Seemingly always in control of his actions, Bakugou was difficult to read, but no matter what, before the day was over, you had to tell him. You grabbed a dress that highlighted the curve of your neck and the gentle slope of your collarbones, a pair of tights since the weather app on your phone told you it might be windy, and left your room. Acknowledging Bakugou sitting on the couch with his book with a nod, you closed the bathroom door behind you. Bakugou listened in anticipation of your voice, but he only heard the muffled sound of running water. Your mood had vastly improved, and the air in the apartment felt less like fog and more like sunlight, something he felt grateful for. Maybe it was the early morning hour. He never heard you sing as you got ready for work. He still had no clue what the hell to do. If he'd just woken up back home, then this conundrum wouldn't be an issue, but his stint here was extended for at least one more day, it seemed. He could be oblivious to a lot of things when it came to emotional complexities and relationships, but he wasn't naive enough not to validate his own growing feelings.
So stupid,
he mumbled before tossing his book aside to grab a glass of water. He'd only taken a sip when he stepped out of the bathroom and into the morning light. Once his eyes caught sight of you, he promptly choked on his water. It would have been a terrible lie to say he handled that well, considering how controlled he vowed to be today. You'd never worn a dress in front of him before, and damn it if he didn't think you looked good in it. Hardly 12 hours later, and he was already enduring another coughing fit, which made him remember the cupcake, which also made him wish you weren't staring at him with those expressive eyes of yours. You okay? You asked across the counter. Bakugou just nodded and wiped away stray water droplets with the back of his hand. Muttering too low to hear or for your phone to translate, he said,
"It's just a stupid dress."
Despite his strange look, you reluctantly accepted his answer and pointed back towards the bathroom to signal that it was free. It wasn't until you were back in your room that he risked chugging the rest of his water and softly banged his head on the sink.
Fuck.
He loathed cold showers, but took one anyway, letting the stinging water slide over his scars and prickle his skin with goosebumps. It was a futile attempt to clear his head. Tired of wearing a combination of the same clothes day after day, with no other choice, Bakugou dressed in the outfit he arrived here in. Jeans, a black V-neck shirt, and an orange hoodie with the sleeves pulled up to his elbows. He was slipping on his shoes when you came out of your bedroom, and it took effort not to lose his balance. You'd fixed your hair in a similar way to how you wore it to your concert. A necklace glittered around your neck, and earrings caught the light on your jawline. And was that lip stuff? Gloss? Fuck, he didn't know, but his ears burned when he briefly thought of how plump they looked. You were going grocery shopping, for fuck's sake. Why were you dressed like that? Ready to go? You asked with a small smile. He swallowed the lump in his throat and reoriented himself before answering.
Yeah, let's go. This is going to be a long damn day,
he thought. He grabbed the sunglasses you lent him the previous weekend, sending a quick glare your way when he heard you suppress a laugh at the sight while you grabbed some mismatched cloth bags you used for groceries. Walking down the hallway, down the stairs, and outside into the open air, you led him to your car parked in front of one of the other buildings.
Still can't believe you can reach the pedals with your height,
he jabbed in an attempt to have a bit of control over the situation. If he could keep you on your toes, then everything would be fine. I can reach them just fine, thanks, you replied with a stern tone while holding your phone in front of you and walking towards the driver's side of your car.
Doesn't count if you're basically eating the steering wheel.
The deadpan look you gave him across the hood of your car was worth it. Too easy. I do not eat the steering wheel. You stuck your tongue out at him before ducking down into the car. Bakugou's eyes darkened slightly as he slid into the passenger side. The last time he drove with you was towards the theme park. Without the stress of wondering whether or not you were secretly working with a villain, by now he was 99% sure you weren't, Bakugou observed the buildings and shops on the short drive to the store. The one familiar thing about the trip was your road rage and silent seething that Bakugou still found hilarious. Someone cut you off at a light, and you flipped them off with a stream of what he assumed to be colorful curses. The juxtaposition of your demeanor this morning and your demeanor now made him snicker. What's so funny? You asked, as though it wasn't obvious.
How mad you get at stupid drivers,
he replied, cutting his eyes your way behind the shades of his sunglasses. Like I said before, if they weren't so infuriating, there'd be no problem. It's like they drive with their eyes closed. You pulled into the lot of the same grocery store you took him to before, and his mouth quirked up into a smile. The angry puppy dog look you held was still kind of cute. It felt pleasant to be at ease with you, but he tried not to dwell on that fact. Rather than ease your frustrations, the parking lot only served to piss you off more, and it took a surprising amount of effort not to burst out laughing. How the fuck do you even get your license parking like that? At one point, you saw what you assumed to be a free spot, but as you pulled closer, a motorcycle sat hidden behind a van. You promptly laid your head down on the wheel with a heavy sigh, and a bark of laughter erupted out of Bakugou. Please use your quirk to blow up that bike. Wiping a fake tear from his eye, Bakugou shook his head.
No. Tough luck.
Bakugou silently wondered if you'd ever been in a real fight, or what would happen if you got truly angry at someone or something. He didn't necessarily want to find out, though. When you finally managed to find a parking spot, you calmed down. Snatching up your bags, you took a deep breath before walking towards the front of the store with Bakugou at your side, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his jeans like usual when the two of you were out in public. It's probably for the safety of drivers everywhere that I walk most places, you commented, earning a small snicker from the man at your side. Of course, small threats of violence would amuse him. You grabbed a cart, disliked the squeakiness of one of the wheels, put it back, and grabbed another one that was nice and quiet. If you are serious about cooking, then pick out what you want and I'll get specific things I want. Deal? Rather than shy away from the designated task of unofficial chef of your apartment, he grinned.
Good. I'll teach you what real food tastes like.
You just rolled your eyes at how smug he could be. Sure, the food he'd cooked so far had been delicious, and he really did seem like a perfectionist when it came to proving someone wrong in the pettiest of ways, but you weren't about to let him jab at your personal tastes. You had a crush on him, didn't you? So how bad could your tastes be? Still surprised your taste buds work, you quipped back, while tugging the cart through the small bakery in the store and tossing in a box of cookies. Some people stared due to the translator, but you were used to it by now. It was the best solution to the language barrier you had on hand. Maybe you should pick up the dictionary yourself and learn some more phrases to show up Bakugou for once.
Don't be pissed at me just because you have the heat resistance of a 4-year-old.
For that, you tried to swerve the cart into his side, but he pushed it back on course while giving you a "try that again and see what happens" glare behind his sunglasses. You just stuck your tongue out at him, knowing he wouldn't make a scene in public and risk drawing too much attention to himself. The two of you went up and down aisles, Bakugou's hand shooting out when he passed something familiar or asking about unrecognizable items. You grabbed things you wanted that didn't need his input, while he appeared to mentally prepare meals and the ingredients needed. Even if he went home soon, you could surely figure out some recipes with his picks. Your fingers gripped the worn plastic handle of the cart at the sudden thought of Bakugou leaving. He was here now, so you'd focus on enjoying today while it lasted. While wandering around the produce section, Bakugou proceeded to grab different variations of peppers, smirking when he saw your face pucker.
You told me to cook, so don't complain.
He was right, of course. You had no room to argue since you dared him to cook in the first place. His smug attitude was as annoying as it was attractive, because you knew by now he could back up everything he claimed. Standing up to him by being a smartass put you in this position. Damn it. You pointed down towards the personal hygiene section and left Bakugou with the cart to wander around picking things as he pleased. So long as he didn't overload your bucket with fancy ingredients, it wasn't an issue. Toothpaste. Gotcha. Grabbing a box of the brand you normally bought, which was luckily on sale this week, you turned around to head back down towards the produce section when you stopped to face the display opposite the toothpaste. Assorted personal care items stared you in the face, ranging from tampons and pregnancy tests to flavored lube and condom boxes with erotic silhouettes. Oh God. You mumbled, before power walking down the aisle. You refused to mull over how long it had been since you'd been intimate with someone or give yourself any flustered ideas while grocery shopping. By the time you and Bakugou waited in line to check out, your cart was full of items that would ideally last you a couple of weeks. He picked out things you normally skipped, so you were curious to see his recipe plans. Bakugou normally disliked grocery shopping. Not that he didn't find cooking or experimenting with new foods more enjoyable than other things, it just felt tedious and took too long. Back home, there were services to get groceries delivered, but the few times he tried it, the numbskull that picked out his items grabbed vegetables on the verge of expiration and shitty-looking cuts of meat. Eventually, he gave up and went back to doing his own shopping. With someone to talk to, however, the boredom wasn't as annoying as usual. Your faces were always expressive, and every time he picked out something you didn't like, your nose wrinkled in disgust. He'd put them in the cart anyway just to laugh at your frown. With the right cooking method and seasonings, he could make most people enjoy foods they normally hated. He'd take it on as a challenge to fix things you'd like just to savor your surprised face. After loading everything into your car, you insisted on pulling the cart into one of those cart corrals littered around the parking lot. I used to work at a grocery store, and picking up carts that people left lying around was a pain in my ass. Here, you said, while dropping your car keys into his hand before darting off to the nearest corral. Bakugou slid into the passenger side before watching you attempt to ride the cart down the hill because, of course, you would. With this small moment to himself, Bakugou wondered again about what to do. He had to make a decision before the end of the day, the ability to keep himself composed around you becoming more and more difficult every hour. He just needed a bit more time. Maybe this climbing thing would clear his head. When you climbed into the driver's side next to him, Bakugou dropped your keys in your hand, pausing for a fraction of a second as his fingers brushed your palm. The memory of your hand in his the previous night, and how he had to force himself to let go, came flooding back, but he shoved it aside as the car engine roared to life. So, I don't really do a lot of climbing or stuff like that often. Do you usually eat before or after? You asked the question while stopped at a red light on the way back to your apartment. He found your love of food kind of endearing.
Something small before, then carbs and protein after,
he answered, while wondering what to make for lunch while on the subject. The next words out of your mouth made his eye twitch. Okay, so what about clothes? Maybe shorts and a tank top or something like that? Asking him about food was one thing, but a quick image flashed in his mind as he stared straight ahead at the road and refused to slip up like he had this morning. It was just a question about maneuverability, right? It was a question along the same lines as what to eat, right? Right? He swallowed thickly before answering in a flat tone.
Wear whatever you want, as long as you can move around easily.
Today was, indeed, going to be a very long fucking day. When you parked in front of your apartment and the two of you started grabbing up bags, you actually attempted to swat his hand away to grab more bags than he knew you could reasonably carry. Your stubbornness reminded him of himself, a trait he found both amusing and agitating. He was obviously stronger than you, so it seemed fair that he grabbed up the heavier things, but if you wanted to make things perfectly equal, then he wasn't about to object. After unlocking the door and wobbling into the apartment with your arms loaded up with bags, the two of you got to work putting things away in comfortable silence. Bakugou knew where most things went by this point, so you took half the bags while he took the remaining set, finishing fairly quickly as a result. Glad that chore is taken care of, you said, while brushing your hands of invisible dirt. Do you mind making lunch while I go change? You probably have a better idea of what would be best than I do.
Sure,
he answered, with his back to you while pulling out utensils and pans. You grabbed your phone, and he heard you pad through the room and close your bedroom door before taking a deep breath in a futile attempt to center himself and concentrate on the rhythm of the knife in his hand. Something tugged at the back of his mind. You seemed different today with how you were acting, but he couldn't quite pinpoint how. Maybe... Wait. No. Couldn't be. Were you really that devious? The damn cupcake. The dress. Asking what to wear. A couple of answers struck him. 1. This was all some dubious scheme to get a rise out of him, or 2. You really were fucking oblivious to everything you did that made his teeth grind and ears burn.
If you're playing games, I'll win,
he whispered to himself. Both possibilities seemed equally plausible, considering what he knew about you at this point, but he'd observe for a while to determine your intentions. When you came out of your room, Bakugou remained facing the counter with his back to you as he assembled both of your lunches. Ooh, that looks good, you exclaimed behind him. He didn't turn around immediately and instead remained focused on the food in front of him. Subtlety was key here.
Of course it does,
he quipped back as you poured yourself a cup of water. Need any help? Bakugou shook his head at your question before hearing you slide out a chair and sit down at the small kitchen table you owned. He peeked over his shoulder to see you absorbed in your phone before his breath caught in his throat. Some skin-tight black leggings curved around your calves and thighs and up to your shirt, loose and flowy that wound up and around your shoulders. The real thing was arguably worse than what his mind conjured up in the car, his ears burning and jaw clenched at what you picked out. If you were trying to get a rise out of him, and he'd been dumber, then you certainly would have succeeded. However, two could play this game, and he never lost at anything. He just needed to make sure this wasn't you acting obtuse to how you actually looked in those clothes. You were busy checking social media before you pulled up the translator app and looked at Bakugou. "Thanks again for cooking. Is it almost ready?" It took a second for him to respond, and in that time you noticed his shoulders looked a bit tense and... was the back of his neck red?
"Yeah, it's done,"
he said, while carrying over 2 plates, one for himself and one for you. His tone was even as he sat down, avoiding eye contact with you. He hadn't really given any obvious indication that your questions and choices were affecting him. You'd asked him the clothing question in the car, hoping for something, but his stone-like face hadn't budged. You even picked out your favorite leggings that made you feel confident with how it made your butt look, and a loose tank top with a sports bra underneath that peeked out from the large armholes of your shirt. Maybe getting an obvious rise out of him was going to be harder than you thought. You took a bite of food without thinking before you realized that, again, Bakugou hadn't made it overly spicy. I'm nervous at this point that you're just going to lull me into a false sense of security and then set my mouth on fire when I least suspect it. He barked out a laugh at your suspicion before taking a bite of his own meal.
"It does me no good to make you sick with spicy food if you can't drive me to this rock climbing place. But thanks for the idea."
You paled at the thought of him taking your idea literally.
"Gee, you're welcome,"
you quipped sarcastically. Since lunch was small, the two of you ate fairly quickly. You grabbed up the plates and cleaned up while Bakugou went to change. Rock climbing in jeans sounded like a terrible idea. When he came out of the bathroom, you had to keep from staring. You'd seen him in his workout clothes before, but would probably never get accustomed to the sight. "Ready to go?" you asked, while leaning against the wall by the door. Bakugou nodded and grabbed the sunglasses you'd lent him last week. If he liked them so much, maybe he could just take them with him when he left.
"No, don't dwell on that now."
"I looked it up earlier, and the place doesn't seem too far, so we could walk, but I have a feeling my arms and legs will feel like jello, so maybe it's just safer to drive," you said, while walking back outside towards your car.
"If you don't do this often, then that's probably best,"
he replied, while sliding into the passenger seat once more. You pulled up the directions on your phone and set it on the holder on your dashboard as a robotic voice laid out directions for you. The drive was otherwise silent, aside from the small snickers Bakugou made whenever someone did something stupid on the road. At least he was enjoying your road rage. But having him smile at you was distracting, so you kept your eyes straight ahead on the road. When you parked your car in the large open parking lot and got out to stretch your arms, you looked around to see most of the spots occupied. It was Saturday, probably their busiest day, so you expected a lot of people. The building looked large from the outside, so maybe everyone would be spread out at least a little. Walking inside, Bakugou was hit with the familiar smell of sweat, deodorant, rubber, and plastic, the odors of a gym. There were various walls that stretched all the way across the large room and people climbing up or relaying down. A few of the walls reached all the way to the ceiling with some added hanging handholds for extra difficulty. Not that he really needed to, but starting out on an intermediate wall first would draw less attention to himself. After speaking with the man at the front desk, Bakugou watched you pay for the two of you, and again felt a pang of guilt for feeling like a burden. He wasn't about to go digging into your finances, though, and hoped you weren't in a position to struggle just to keep him occupied. He was well off financially back home, but knew not everyone had the same privilege. The two of you and another small group that came in around the same time were led to an area off to the side for what he assumed were safety guidelines and rules. Though not often, he'd done enough of this back home to understand, despite the instructor, who looked like a combination of high on caffeine and ready to drop straight into a nap, not speaking Japanese. Bakugou glanced beside him as you stared as the instructor went over footholds and handholds and how to attach the rope to the safety harness. He didn't need someone explaining things to him as though he were a beginner, but he didn't want to see you slip and fall at any point. Once the training was finished, he followed you over to one of the easier walls. He could use it as a warm-up, but had a sneaking suspicion you might need help, but knew you wouldn't outright ask for it. The bizarre feeling to remain close to you nagged at him, but he didn't immediately dismiss it. He hooked up the safety harness. Of course he didn't need it, but didn't want some annoying employee on his case about it, and wiped the sweat off his palms before grabbing the first handhold. His quirk was his fallback. It came as naturally as breathing, but here he couldn't use it at all. Maybe relying purely on his strength would make this more challenging. Bakugou looked over to see the determined look on your face before you also moved forward to grab the handholds. Although you were certainly weaker than him, Bakugou could tell you weren't someone to give up easily. He could have made it to the top much faster, but instead, he paced himself to point out the occasional foot or handhold when he noticed you seemed lost on where to go next. You slipped a few times, and your annoyed face and puffed out cheeks made him laugh before you'd grit your teeth to move up one more step. By the time he made it to the top, you weren't trailing far behind, but he was eager to move to the other side of the room and try the more difficult walls. You could hold your own without his help. You looked over to see Bakugou at ease, dangling from the top of the wall as though waiting for you so the two of you could rappel down together. Your arms were tired, and you desperately needed some cold water, but you were happy to actually make it to the top even with Bakugou's help. Water, you wheeze, while walking over to the water fountain near the front desk to rest for a few minutes. Bakugou looked as though he hadn't even broken a sweat. He skipped the break and marched over to a much more difficult wall with fewer grips and an incline that jutted out at an intimidating angle. Looking around the room, you saw a few women staring after him as he walked past, but he didn't give them a second glance. As much as you wanted to say something to them, you knew you couldn't. It reminded you once more that, before the end of the day, you'd have to make a choice, even if it was just for the remainder of the night, that could drastically change the dynamic between the two of you for worse or for better. Bakugou stretched, the defined muscles in his arms shifting under his skin before he moved up to grab the wall. Just then, someone waltzed up and tapped on his shoulder, a toned woman with long hair and a pretty face, and said something to him. She was too far away to hear, but she wasn't exactly trying to hide the fact that she was flirting. To your surprise, Bakugou turned his nose up at her with a scowl before hopping up onto the wall as she stood there looking surprised before storming off. He couldn't understand her. Yeah, that had to be it. You thought, while taking another sip of water and watching him jump with practiced ease from one handhold to the next. He really is something else. Bakugou shouldn't have been surprised to find out that he really did mind other people and their annoying interruptions. So he wasn't just going crazy, it was literally just you that he tolerated here in this universe. The thought that he must have liked you more than he was willing to admit made his eye twitch as he concentrated on climbing the wall in front of him. Expending all the pent-up energy he held felt like a blessing, so he was going to use this time to get in as much training and exercise as possible. When Bakugou landed back down on the ground after making it to the top, he looked over to see you staring at another easy wall on the other end of the room. After grabbing a sip of water, he went to an even more difficult wall that most people seemed to be avoiding. Of course, he took it as a challenge. Even with the added difficulty, Bakugou was faster than you at climbing. Every once in a while, he'd look over to see your progress without his help. It was slow, but you were managing. The important thing was that you weren't giving up if you slipped and kept climbing higher and higher. He reached the top of his own wall first, but you followed a minute later, your hand clinging desperately to the hold at the top. The look of satisfied joy on your face couldn't keep his own smile down. You waved at him from across the room with enthusiasm, and damn it if he didn't wave back, though in a far more understated way. You were tougher than you looked. Holy shit, I did it. You exclaimed with a heaving chest as you leaned your head against the wall before rappelling down, which was about 100 times easier than climbing up. Your legs wobbled and arms felt like lead when you landed back down on the ground, but you didn't care. Climbing to the top without Bakugou's help was far more satisfying than you thought it would be, and he actually watched you do it, and waved back. Maybe it was the adrenaline, but you couldn't keep the smile off your face as you unhooked the harness and turned around for a much-needed rest.
Excuse me,
someone said, stepping into your path.
Need any help? Saw you from over there.
The man said while pointing over his shoulder. He wore a collared shirt that matched the other employees helping people. No, thanks. I think I'm good, you replied as your smile faded.
You sure? We're here to help after all. Not that your climbing was bad, but with a bit more instruction, I bet you could do even better next time.
It sounded like a backhanded compliment, which you didn't particularly appreciate. It was one thing if it came from Bakugou, who you didn't mind talking back to, but being rude to an employee was different. You were about to answer when a familiar figure started walking over from across the room. Bakugou's shoulders were squared, and his hands were balled into fists as he practically marched in your direction. He looked kind of mad. Did something happen when you weren't watching? Waving him over, the employee looked up to see Bakugou closing the distance until he reached you. His subtle glare flicked up towards the employee, but softened a bit when his eyes landed on you.
You, sir, are a great climber. Haven't seen you here before, but very impressive.
Bakugou just stared blankly at the employee while you tried not to laugh. Of course he was a good climber considering his occupation and training regimen, but of course, this guy didn't know that.
If he's with you, then I can see that you don't really need my help then.
With a friendly wave, he walked away to help someone else. You pointed over towards the water fountain where the lockers that everyone kept their personal belongings in lay neatly in a grid against the wall. Bakugou understood and followed behind you while you missed the way his ruby eyes flickered up possessively towards the employee before landing back on you. After pulling your bag from the locker and grabbing your phone, you looked up to see Bakugou holding out a styrofoam cup of cold water to you. Arigato. Taking the cup, you downed half the water in one gulp, your throat desperate for relief after that workout session. You're really good, Bakugou, but I shouldn't be surprised, I guess, you admitted before taking another sip of water. You're a better climber than most of the people here. He leaned against the wall beside you, one hand in his pocket and the other holding his own cup of water.
I've climbed actual mountains back home without the safety net, so this wasn't bad. Your idea to come here was good.
At his small bit of praise, a warm bubble floated up into your chest. Thanks. Are you ready to go, or do you want to stay longer? I think I'm done personally, but I can hang out if you want to climb some more. I don't mind. You watched the mental gears turning in his head before he answered. He looked cute when he was thinking, but you kept that thought to yourself.
Yeah, we can go.
You sure? I don't... Bakugou took his hand out of his pocket and promptly bonked you on the head with his fist. It wasn't hard at all, but the whole display surprised you.
I meant what I said. Let's go.
Turning in the equipment was a blessedly quick and easy transaction. Now that you had fulfilled your exercise quota for the entire week, you realized how hungry you were when your stomach growled. This just made Bakugou laugh and poke fun at your food addiction, but so long as he was smiling, you tolerated it. Did you have fun? You asked after climbing into the car and clipping in your seatbelt. Bakugou slid back on the sunglasses he tossed in your bag before nodding with a small smile.
Like I said, not a bad choice.
He seemed a bit lost in thought, and you wondered what was on his mind but decided it was best not to pry. You knew he couldn't have been too tired from all that, so it must have been something else, but you didn't want to turn the tides on the good day the two of you spent together so far. Well, let's go. Can't wait to eat. Used up all my energy climbing.
I'm cooking,
he replied with a slightly ominous tone. You weren't sure whether or not to be excited or terrified as you pulled out of the parking lot to head back home. The drive to your apartment was silent as you used your phone to navigate back home. It was late afternoon now, the orange sun setting across the horizon of the city like a haze. With no more outside distractions, all you could do was mull over what to say and how to say it before the day was done. You had to tell him before the heaviness of inevitable regret ate you whole. Arriving back at your apartment was a blessing, the familiar smells and cool air easing your tension slightly. You wanted to bolt into the shower, but since Bakugou insisted on cooking, figured he might appreciate the first go. Hey, do you want to shower first so you can be comfortable while you cook? Sliding off his shoes, he gave you a small but grateful look.
I'll be quick,
he replied. Take your time. You peeked over your shoulder to watch him gather his things from the hallway closet before you disappeared into your room, leaving the door cracked open. Hot water scalded Bakugou's skin in a comforting way as he washed the sweat and smell of artificial rock walls down the drain. He sighed and thought once again about what the hell he was going to do. The day was ending, and he'd basically gotten nowhere. It wasn't like him to avoid acting on an important decision, but he was out of his element, and your feelings mattered as much as his. Engaging fully in his pro-hero lifestyle had stunted him more than he thought with these types of emotional choices. For all he knew, he could wake up back home tomorrow and would never see you again. The sudden thought made him wince. As desperate as he was to get back home and return to his normal life, he'd be lying to himself if he said he wouldn't miss that damn smile of yours. While Bakugou mulled over his lack of decision-making, you sorted through your clothes for some pajamas while wondering when, not if, to tell him how you felt. Either tonight or tomorrow, you told yourself. You couldn't keep dancing around this stupid crush, but you also didn't want to ruin how today was going, which admittedly was probably the coward in you trying to avoid a possible rejection. If I keep putting it off, I'll never have the chance. But what if I do this and he's still here and everything turns weird and awkward? The thought of him not wanting to be with you or him feeling uncomfortable in an already precarious situation made you bite your lip from the emotional sting. Setting some clean pajamas on your bed, you looked back at the stuffed animal you clung to the night before, leaned up against your pillow. Or what if something goes right for once? No regrets, right? I'll play it by ear, and if after dinner I haven't put my foot in my mouth... If the positivity of the day wore on just for a few more hours, then you'd gather up your courage and be honest with Bakugou. You sat on the end of your bed, messing with your phone, when you heard a knock at the door. Looking up, you saw Bakugou standing in the doorframe haloed by the overly yellow apartment lighting coming from your living room. During these silent moments, he looked almost angelic. His hair was still damp from his shower, and the familiar black tank top he wore clung to his skin as he pointed a thumb over his shoulder back towards the bathroom. You nodded in understanding when his ruby eyes focused on something behind you that seemed to catch him by surprise. Glancing over your shoulder, you realized it was probably the stuffed animal that he'd definitely not won for you. His eyes darted between you and the toy, eyebrows furrowed, but his eyes unreadable before he turned around back towards the kitchen. What just happened? You wondered, while grabbing your clothes and following him out at a distance towards the bathroom for your own shower. Bakugou stood with his back against the kitchen counter, arms crossed as he heard you pad through behind him towards the bathroom. Once he heard the click of the door, he breathed heavily through his nose, his fingernails digging into his palms as he cursed.
Fuck. I forgot about that stupid thing. She kept it?
The fact that you kept the toy he'd won a week ago, something he completely forgot about to be honest, pretty much erased any doubts about how you felt. So what the hell was he supposed to do? Ignoring things wasn't his style. It was the type of immature teenage bullshit that he avoided, but he'd been doing exactly that since earlier this week, which pissed him off. He either had to put a stop to all this tiptoeing around confessions left unsaid, or say fuck it for however long this might last. It'd be unfair to you if he kept his mouth shut anyway. And hell, what if you said something first? How would he respond? If things dragged on, neither of you would be comfortable. That much was obvious. Would giving in for, what, a day? A week? Be worth it? Bakugou still had no damn clue when he'd return home. If he were to wake up tomorrow back in his universe and back to his normal life, what would he want to have happened? What image did he want to close his eyes to if it was for the last time? The image came faster and clearer than he expected. You, smiling and happy in his arms. Shit. His ears burned at the thought, but he shouldn't have been too surprised with everything running around in his imagination. With that, the decision was made. But how was he supposed to do this? Did he just blurt it out? Build up to it? Fuck. He still needed to cook too. Bakugou turned around to start pulling out ingredients, his mind busy with hypothetical confessions and uncooked recipes. He'd talk to you about this after dinner. If it tasted amazing, which it would, obviously, and things didn't turn horribly awkward like the previous night, then hopefully you'd remain in a good mood to make this whole thing easier. You'd been so preoccupied with your thoughts that you didn't realize how long you'd been pruning in the shower. He obviously saw the stuffed animal on your bed, but you had no clue what was going through his mind when he walked away. Was he mad that you kept it? Ugh, why does this have to be so hard? I just gotta spill my guts, I guess, and hope for the best. After you finished your shower, you got to work drying your hair. Without the grime of sweat, you felt much more comfortable in your shorts and oversized t-shirt. The smell of something delicious wafted in through the door and made your mouth water as you combed the tangles out of your hair. After leaving the bathroom and padding through the living room to dump your sweaty clothes in the hamper, you wandered back towards the kitchen, the heavenly aroma pulling you in like a magnet. Bakugou stood near the stove with his back against the counter in an almost mirrored position from before you took a shower. The steaming pan on the stovetop proved that he had indeed moved at least a little. He looked up to you when you walked closer, his crimson eyes still just as unreadable as before. "Hey," he said, eyes flitting between you and food. Pulling out your phone, you replied, "Hey, that smells really good." The comment put a small smirk on his face. "Of course it does." Bakugou stated it as fact, as though anything less was completely preposterous. You rolled your eyes at his teasing tone. Leaning on the opposite side of the counter with the phone between Bakugou and yourself, you tapped your nails on the counter with a sigh. Hope you had fun grocery shopping and being a monkey, because I'm definitely not doing anything tomorrow. I can already tell my arms are going to be sore, you said with a light laugh before stretching your hands above your head. He scrutinized you as though he didn't believe your declaration of laziness. "For not having done that in a long time, you weren't completely bad at it," he quipped. Your overly exaggerated sneer made him chuckle, but you really liked it when he laughed, even if it was at you looking like an idiot. If he was enjoying himself, then maybe things would turn out for the best. "I made it to the top twice." You held up 2 fingers towards his face while staring at him with that adorably determined look he'd grown attached to. "Yeah, on the easy walls." Bakugou pushed himself off from the counter to stir dinner as you sputtered behind him. Honestly, teasing you was dangerously easy. "No one starts out on the hard walls, not even you, I bet. So, there. You stuck your tongue out at him, and Bakugou bit the inside of his cheek on reflex. Bakugou pulled a couple of plates down before turning down the heat on the stove. "Who done?" he said in your language, while you grabbed some silverware in the opposite end of the kitchen. He could judge by this point when he was too far away for the phone to pick up his voice reliably. "Arigato, Bakugou." He looked over his shoulder to see you almost wiggling in anticipation of the dinner he made as you prepared the table. Running a hand through his hair, Bakugou thought he was seriously in denial if he didn't notice how every stupid thing you did amused him. He plated equal servings and set the food down before taking his own seat to your right. You reached back and grabbed your phone to place it between the two of you again. I hate to admit it, but you are a better cook than me, so I really do appreciate you cooking. Bakugou smirked confidently, but shrugged it off as he watched you take the first bite. Your face went through a series of expression changes, from satisfied to surprised. It's so good, but I'm still suspicious because this isn't that spicy. As funny as your shock would have been, he decided it was best to make it edible to you and keep the mood light. He still couldn't help poking and prodding, though.
I'll just hit you when your guard is down.
Bakugou took his own bite and didn't so much as flinch. You scoffed, before the corner of your mouth quirked up into a small smile. I thought you were a smart hero. Giving away your plan is a rookie mistake. The banter continued throughout dinner. He was far more aware of what he said and how he said it compared to the previous night, but didn't flinch away if his voice picked on a slightly flirty tone or you looked at him a certain way. A mixture of comfort and anxiousness settled into his chest as he enjoyed this time with you, while also wondering what exactly he was going to say. When the two of you cleaned your plates, you insisted on washing because it was only fair, because he cooked. While Bakugou wasn't nearly as tired as you probably felt after today, he wasn't going to fight you about the dishes. Once the plates sat in the drying rack, Bakugou looked up to notice you appeared tense, but he couldn't place his finger on exactly why. You started to bite your lip and fidget with your hands in a way that solidified his assumption. Finally, you cleared your throat, pulled your phone closer to you, and said, "Listen, Bakugou, I need to tell you something. And I know it might be weird or change how you see me, but I just need to tell you." He stared up at you, his arm draped across the back of the chair he sat in. There were two options for confessions here. 1, confess your feelings. 2, confess some deep, dark secret. Shit. Maybe this meant he wouldn't have to stumble over his own words after all. Before he could figure out a reply, however, you continued. Okay. This has been on my mind for a while, debating on whether or not I should say anything, but I figured I'd rather you know and deal with what comes after than not say anything at all and you disappear. I think I'd regret it. So, no regrets. You let your hands fall to your sides, fists clenching and unclenching in rhythm with his own beating heart. Ruby eyes trained on you, fully attentive to whatever you were about to say. I like you. As in, more than just a friend way. And I mean, it's fine if you don't feel the same or whatever. I just need you to know. You put your hands out for emphasis before continuing. And this is probably super awkward. Shit. Of all the things I expected out of my life, a crazy Hawkeye with explosion powers appearing in my bedroom was definitely not on the list. You're a smartass, but you make me laugh, and you're smart and confident, and I just have fun hanging out with you, and, feel safe when you're around. I think that if I met you on the street, no quirks or anything, that I'm pretty sure I'd like you exactly the same. You'd still be you, so I guess no matter what, I'm glad we met, Bakugou. And, that was a lot longer than I meant it to be. For a moment, Bakugou just sat there, stunned. He hadn't expected you to blurt out all of that. It was far more put together than whatever straightforward garbage he would have started off with. He blushed and looked down because fuck, how was he supposed to follow all that? Bakugou? Can you say something? Glancing up, he noticed how nervous you looked, even more on edge than before you spilled your guts out to him. No one had ever confessed to him like this before, not in such a heartfelt way. Your voice cracked as though you might start crying, and he didn't want that at all. Now you were just waiting for his answer. He cleared his throat and ran a sweaty hand through his pale blonde hair.
Sometimes I'm shit with words.
You interrupted his improvised thought with a small step forward. Oh, I mean, it's fine if you don't like me back or feel the same.
Shut up.
His tone wasn't demanding, but he heard you click your teeth as your jaw snapped shut at his words. It made him wince.
Fuck.
This was going terribly. He really was bad at this. Bakugou stood up, his chair clattering against the floor as he walked over to stand directly in front of you.
I might not be the best with words, but I am good with actions.
His hand came up to cup your chin and tilted it up just enough so you could look him in the eyes. Up close, they glistened and pulled him in. Bakugou leaned down just enough to let his lips make contact with yours, giving you enough time to back away if you wished. It was soft and tentative, not wanting to scare you away by being so forward. When you didn't respond, he pulled away slightly to make sure you were all right when you reached up and grabbed him by the shirt and pulled him down to kiss him like it was the last thing you'd ever do. Bakugou could have sworn he saw stars, but he'd never admit so aloud. The fact that you were both smiling into the kiss would stay between you always. Your hands gripped the soft cotton fabric of his shirt, your fingers digging into your palms like if you'd let go, he'd slip away, and all of this would wind up a dream. For as brash and headstrong as you knew him to be, the kiss was deliciously soft and chaste and warm, and you savored it like tea on a cold day, like the lingering sweetness of honey. He smelled like the soap in your shower and the leftover fumes of dinner, a smoldering bonfire that comforted you and brought you warmth and light on cool nights. This was what it felt like to kiss the man who you had gotten to know over the past week and a half. He was real, and he was kissing you, and this single moment erased any doubt you'd internalized about regret. More than worth it, a memory to cherish. Eventually, you had to breathe and pulled away reluctantly. You knew your face was probably the same shade as his pretty red eyes that currently stared down at you in a way you'd only dreamed about until now. Clearing your throat, you couldn't help but bite your lip and smile like an idiot. I guess this means you like me back, huh? Was all you could manage before ducking your chin into your chest. His laugh echoed like a symphony in your chest, the apparent tension and anxiety of the confession replaced with an easy and comfortable joy.
No shit,
he said, making you smile even wider. All you wanted to do was kiss him again, your eyes darting up quickly towards his lips. He smirked and understood your unspoken request, leaning down to capture your own in another kiss. More passionate, harder contact, your throat closed as you struggled to swallow down your racing pulse. No less sweet, though. Your hand still gripped his shirt, your knuckles grazing his collarbones as the hand, no longer cupping your chin, wandered to your waist and pulled you just a bit closer. When breathing became necessary again, you pulled back, your breaths coming in small pants, but the satisfied grin never left your face. In a spur-of-the-moment gesture, you let go of his shirt to hug him. If he could kiss you, then a hug wasn't out of line, right? Bakugou stiffened as your arms wrapped around his back, making you nervous that you'd crossed a boundary. You loosened your grip to pull away, when his arms came up around your shoulders to return the embrace. It was loose and slightly awkward, but it was happening. You thought you might float away, untethered by gravity or stress. He felt warm, warmer than you thought he'd be. Maybe it was a side effect of his quirk, or maybe it was just a feeling of comfort in your chest and the flush of your skin against his. Eventually, the two of you separated, and you ran a hand through your hair nervously and cleared your throat once more. Well, no offense, but you've been very good at not looking like a flustered moron, unlike myself at least, once per day probably. So how was I supposed to know? Bakugou kept one hand loosely on your waist, while his eyes darted off to the side for a split second, his mouth twisting as if debating on whether or not to answer.
Not that you've seen anyway. Or you're just oblivious.
He saw how your eyes glittered with mischief at the comment. Oh, so there have been moments. Tell me one at least. You held a finger in front of your face, but he brushed it away with his free hand.
Hell no.
He wasn't going to make this easy on you. Oh, come on. You've literally seen me make a fool of myself. The least you could do is tell me one time you felt that way. Both of your hands came together as if begging for scraps, for anything he'd toss your way. You were teasing him, obviously, but there was genuine curiosity in your eyes, so he considered maybe one of the least embarrassing moments. Definitely not the cupcake incident, though. Absolutely not.
This morning when you came out in your dress and tights,
he admitted, his thumb rubbing absent-mindedly across the soft cotton of your shirt. You stared at him as though he'd grown another head as realization set in. You... I knew it! Choking on water was a bullshit excuse. Bakugou bit the inside of his cheek, knowing he couldn't improvise his way through any more incidents, but maybe since all this shit was now out in the open, he wouldn't have to.
Don't tell me you didn't know exactly what you were doing, dressing up cute and shit for something as mundane as grocery shopping, he retorted, before realizing exactly what he just admitted. Oh, so I'm cute then. You batted your eyelashes dramatically while Bakugou cast his gaze to the right of your head. God damn it, you were weaseling all this shit out of him left and right. He was right about you being devious, apparently. After a minute, you dragged him to the couch, no longer conscious of keeping dedicated distance between the two of you. The air was pleasant and light, the growing unease and stress of the past week falling away easily like dry leaves from a rocking tree branch during autumn. You were in the middle of telling him something when you stopped and clapped your hands over your mouth. Oh, fuck, I just realized something, but I guess it's sort of pointless to ask now. Bakugou flicked you gently on the side of the head, his knee brushing against yours on the couch cushion. He didn't bother shifting away. Just spit it out.
Fine, fine. So demanding. I completely forgot to ask before I blurted everything out if you were even single. I'm not a homewrecker. His jaw hung limp as he stared at you incredulously.
What? How is that not obvious? Have I ever mentioned anyone back home who isn't one of my dumb friends?
You just shrugged and laughed weakly. I mean, you seem like a private person. Maybe I figured it was too personal?
If I was with someone and hadn't mentioned them by this point, I'd figure shit wasn't going well anyway. And as a hero, I'm morally obligated not to be a shitbag.
He answered. At that, you smiled softly and scooted close enough to lean against his side. Unfamiliar with close contact when it came to this sort of thing, Bakugou stiffened on reflex, before his arm came up to drape behind you over the back of the couch. As horribly cliché as it felt, Bakugou surprisingly didn't mind so much. The two of you plugged in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood and picked up where Bakugou left off the other day. He appreciated hearing his native Japanese, even if it was just through an anime, but also found the plot and characters interesting so far. Every few minutes, he'd glance down at you nestled against his side, your eyes glued to the screen. The entire dynamic had changed just over the past hour after your bold confession. It took guts to put yourself out there in such a way, but now, with this heavy stressor off his chest, he could go back to focusing solely on solutions for how to return home. For now, though, just for tonight, The comfort of sitting next to you and reflecting on your words was enough. He wasn't exactly a cuddler, and physical intimacy was well out of his familiar range, but when you tilt your head back and look up at him through your eyelashes, he relented to the occasional kiss that sent the faintest of shivers down his spine. Reveling in the new sensations of being open and honest about your feelings with each other felt so damn nice. You honestly weren't sure how he'd react to you opening your heart out, and prepared to get metaphorically stabbed in the chest if he outright rejected you. Soft and Bakugou were words you wouldn't have associated with each other, but here you were, leaned up against his side like some cheesy sitcom. You wanted to take advantage of what possible little time you had left, to bask in the fact that he really was yours this time, but as the night wore on, you yawned and felt your eyes drooping. Bakugou nudged you in the shoulder, and you sat up a little straighter.
Go to sleep. It's been a long day.
A lingering string of unaired thoughts stuck to the roof of your mouth. If you went to sleep and he disappeared before the morning, this would be all you had. But maybe it was enough. Maybe one night would satisfy the craving that pulled you closer to Bakugou Katsuki. To avoid falling asleep against him, which didn't sound so terrible, honestly, and drooling down your chin or on his shirt, though, you gave in. Fine. You aren't the boss of me, but fine. I'll listen just this once. Standing up, you stretched your arms above your head before heading into the bathroom to brush your teeth. Your steps faltered for a moment when you realized you'd been smooching Bakugou with dinner breath. But so had he, so it was fine, right? After some excessive use of mouthwash, you walked back out to see Bakugou turning off the TV before those shining sun-like eyes of his landed on you. Well, good night. Even if you wake up back home tomorrow and it was just for tonight, I don't regret tonight. Walking forward, you beckoned him down to your level with your finger. You covered that handsome smirk of his with one last lingering goodnight kiss, and you swore the room started spinning from how light you felt.
Oyasumi,
he whispered in a deliciously low tone when he pulled away. You suddenly didn't feel so tired anymore, but you couldn't back out now. Before closing the bedroom door behind you, you looked over your shoulder one last time at him, and gave him a small wave before letting it click shut. As soon as he was out of sight, you felt like jumping up and down and squealing like a teenager again from the bursting amount of exuberance you felt. Instead, you bounced on your bed, your feet kicking in the air and plugging up your phone to immediately text your friend because you absolutely had to tell someone as soon as possible. Oh my god, that happened! That totally happened! Guess what? OMG, did you touch his butt? Please say yes. No. Then... We kissed. Mouth on mouth. It was amazing! Yes! Get it? Kinda chapped lips, but who cares? Very soft, but hot. Yes! Tell me everything. You laughed into your pillow while relaying exactly what happened to your friend, texting back and forth in the darkness. Bakugou watched as you closed the door to your bedroom, eyes meeting for the last time that night. He licked his lips to remember the taste of your own. Intimacy was a bit foreign to him, honestly. Always so damn focused on his hero work, he'd probably let things slip by without even realizing. But the past was in the past, and he was here now. Even if, just for tonight, the absence of his internal struggle on what to do with how he felt relieved the weight from his chest. Yours as well, he assumed, since it seemed you'd been internalizing a similar debate. That cute-as-shit smile of yours, and the feeling of you in his arms and against his chest, put another sappy smile on his face without him even realizing. Of course, he still missed home and wanted desperately to go back as soon as possible. But why squander this time with you worrying about shit he had no control over? Turning out the lights one by one, He went to brush his teeth when he heard you from inside your room. Curiosity getting the better of him, Bakugou padded silently up to your door and placed an ear close enough to hear. A definite giggle came from behind the closed door this time. He rolled his eyes and walked back towards the bathroom.
What a sap. Guess I'm a damn hypocrite, though.
If you woke up tomorrow with the opportunity for one more day like tonight, Bakugou thought that he wouldn't mind that so much. If things were still uneasy between, you grabbed a dress that highlighted the curve of your neck and gentle slope of your collarbones. A pair of tight... Okay. Ice cream truck's here, yay! Da 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 da. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Bum 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 ba 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 ba. Ah, good old ice cream truck. After unlocking the door and wobbling into the apartment with your arms loaded up with bags, the two of you got to work. Oh, that's a long sentence. Hold up. The damn cupcake, fucking dogs. Why are you barking? Don't bark, please. I'm trying to record. Oh dear. His crimson eyes still... Whoa. My tongue just got tied there. Holy crap.